The Great Water War. Arizona, December 2027. The first thing people noticed was the color of the sky. Not the fires. Not the empty reservoirs. Not the helicopters circling the cities. The sky. It had turned the color of old brass. Mara Vance stood on the roof of the apartment building and watched Phoenix disappear beneath a brown-orange horizon. Somewhere beyond the city, something was burning. She couldn't see the flames anymore. There was too much smoke. Her phone had been dead for 9 hours. The emergency broadcast had stopped 3 days ago. The water coming from the kitchen faucet had stopped yesterday morning. And the city had finally stopped pretending everything was going to be okay. Mara was 36 years old. She had been a hydrology technician before the government dissolved her department into something called the Southwest Emergency Resource Authority. That had sounded official, important, temporary. Now there was no authority. There was only water. And there wasn't enough of it. The number. The number appeared on every surviving screen. 248 billion gallons. Below it, Arizona water loss. Unexplained. The official explanation changed 6 times. Aquifer collapse. Infrastructure failure. Unauthorized diversion. Cyber attack. Measurement error. Then sabotage. Finally, nobody bothered explaining it. 248 billion gallons had simply vanished from the state's water accounting systems. Some people said the water had been stolen. Some said it had been pumped underground. Some said it had never existed. Mara knew better. She had seen the satellite data. The reservoirs had actually fallen. The aquifers had actually dropped. Groundwater wells that had been productive for decades suddenly produced air. Entire sections of agricultural land sank. In some places, the earth opened like a cracked bowl. The strange part wasn't that Arizona was running out of water. Everyone knew that could happen. The strange part was the speed. It happened in weeks. And then California started losing water. Then Nevada. Then northern Mexico. The world began using a phrase that had previously belonged in history books. Water war. At first, it was only television pundits. Then politicians. Then generals. Then ordinary people. By Christmas, nobody laughed when they heard it. 2. The fire from above. On December 27th, Mara woke to the sound of glass breaking. She rolled off the mattress and hit the floor. A second later, the apartment shook. Outside, a column of fire climbed into the night. The downtown water treatment plant was burning. Mara crawled toward the window. There were no planes. No missiles. Nothing she could see. Just a thin white streak descending from the clouds. Touched the building. The roof ignited. Mara stared. Her neighbor, Ellis, stood behind her. What was that? I don't know. He swallowed. You saw it. I saw something. That wasn't a bomb. No. What was it? Mara didn't answer, because she remembered the classified briefing. A briefing she had been told never existed. High-altitude directed energy systems. Satellite-based lasers. Weapons designed not to destroy cities. Designed to destroy infrastructure. Water pumps. Power stations. Reservoir gates. Communication towers. Rail lines. A modern war didn't need armies marching across borders. It needed only to make civilization thirsty. 3. January 1st, 2028. There were no fireworks. Phoenix spent New Year's Eve in darkness. Mara sat on the floor beside a battery-powered radio while the final government broadcast repeated every 30 minutes. Citizens are advised to remain calm, then static. Do not attempt to travel into restricted areas. Static. Water distribution points will reopen when conditions permit. Static. Then a man's voice. Quiet. Almost whispered. Don't go to the water stations. Mara froze. Ellis looked at her. The voice continued. They aren't giving out water. A pause. They're giving out control. The transmission ended. Ellis whispered, "Who was that?" Mara looked toward the window. The question is how many people heard him. 4. The road. 3 days later, Phoenix began emptying. Not evacuating. Emptying. There was a difference. Evacuation meant somebody was in charge. This was migration. Thousands of cars headed north. Most didn't make it. Gas stations ran dry. Highways became parking lots. People abandoned vehicles and continued on foot. Mara left with a backpack, 2 canteens, a folding knife, a flashlight, 3 protein bars, a paper map, and a photograph of her sister, Lena. Lena had left Phoenix 2 months earlier. She had been traveling toward Colorado. Mara hadn't heard from her since. Her only clue was a text message received on December 31st. Don't trust the reservoirs. Nothing else. Mara carried the phone anyway. It had become an object of superstition, like a dead person's watch. 5. The desert. By January 8th, the roads belonged to scavengers. Mara learned the rules quickly. Don't travel alone. Don't advertise water. Don't sleep near highways. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And never, ever drink from a container you didn't fill yourself. She saw things she couldn't explain. A family living inside an abandoned school bus. A man pulling a shopping cart filled with bottled water and ammunition. A woman trading jewelry for 2 cups of water. Children wearing respirator masks because of the smoke. At night, fires burned along the horizon. Sometimes they were wildfires. Sometimes they weren't. One night Mara watched a bright point descend from the sky, touched the mountains. A fireball blossomed. The earth shook beneath her. No explosion followed. Just silence. Ellis looked upward. They're fighting. Who? He pointed at the stars. Everyone. 6. The camp. They found the settlement near an abandoned mining town. There were 43 people. They called it Haven. It had a well. That was enough to make it a kingdom. The people of Haven lived inside old warehouses and underground tunnels. They had generators, solar panels, a radio tower, and guns. Lots of guns. The leader was a former sheriff named Calder. He was missing 2 fingers. He looked at Mara's canteen. How much? 3 liters. You've got more. No. He smiled. Everybody says that. Mara didn't smile back. Calder studied her. You know what happened? To Arizona? To the water. Mara hesitated. Yes. His smile disappeared. Then you might want to see something. 7. Below the earth. The mine descended farther than Mara expected. They passed abandoned equipment, collapsed tunnels, old drilling machinery. Then they reached a cavern. Mara stopped. There was water. Not a puddle. Not a stream. An underground lake. It stretched farther than the flashlight could reach. Mara stared. That's impossible. Calder nodded. That's what they told us. Where did it come from? We don't know. She approached the water. Something bothered her. The lake was perfectly still. No insects. No movement. No sound. Mara crouched. She touched the surface. Warm. Too warm. Then something moved beneath her hand. She jumped backward. What was that? Calder raised his rifle. The water rippled. Once. Twice. Then stopped. Mara stared into the blackness. She thought she saw lights. Far below. Moving lights. Like an entire city beneath the lake. 8. The Second War. By February, the world had changed. Countries stopped exporting food. Borders closed. Water convoys became military operations. Cities began rationing electricity. People tore solar panels from abandoned buildings. Children learned which clouds meant rain and which meant smoke. The old world disappeared quietly. No single explosion announced its death. It died at grocery stores, at gas stations, at empty hospitals, at dry faucets, at traffic lights that never turned green again. Mara heard reports on the radio. Russia blamed China. China blamed the United States. The United States blamed Russia. Europe blamed everyone. Nobody admitted to using orbital weapons. Nobody admitted that the fires were deliberate. But every time negotiations began, another reservoir burned. Another pumping station exploded. Another city went dark. The war was no longer about territory. It was about the last drinkable water on Earth. 9. Lena. Mara found her sister's name on a wall. It was written in charcoal. Lena Vance. Underneath, northbound. And below that, they know about the water underground. Mara touched the words. Who wrote this? A boy sitting nearby looked up. She did. Mara turned. When? 3 weeks ago. Where is she? The boy pointed north. She went looking for the machine. What machine? He shrugged. The one that's drinking the world. 10. The machine. They left Haven at dawn. Mara. Ellis. Calder. And 6 others. They traveled north through landscapes that no longer looked like America. Abandoned suburbs became ghost towns. Highways became trails. Shopping centers became shelters. Billboards advertised products nobody could buy. One read, "Fresh water, pure life." Someone had painted beneath it, "Liar." They eventually reached an enormous installation hidden beneath an old military communications facility. Lena was there. Alive. Thinner. Older somehow. She hugged Mara so tightly neither spoke for almost a minute. Then Lena said, "They never lost the water." Mara stared at her. "What?" "They moved it." "Who?" Lena looked toward the underground facility. "Everyone." 11. The reservoir below. The machine wasn't a weapon. It was a pumping system. Enormous. Ancient-looking. Modern-looking. Both at once. Thousands of pipes descended into the earth. They crossed continents. Lena explained that the original system had been designed decades earlier as a planetary water management experiment. Desalination. Aquifer storage. Deep earth reservoirs. Climate stabilization. But something had gone wrong. Or perhaps something had been intentional. The system had begun redirecting groundwater toward deep storage regions. When governments discovered what was happening, they fought over control. Then someone weaponized the network. The water wasn't disappearing. It was being transferred from populated regions into protected underground reservoirs. And those reservoirs were now being guarded by armies. Mara stared at the enormous map. Red lines crossed the planet. North America, Asia, Africa, Europe, the Middle East. Everywhere. A global circulatory system. The planet's water had become infrastructure, and infrastructure had become a weapon. 12. The last message. A radio crackled. A voice came through. "Attention." Everyone stopped. Global emergency broadcast. Static. Then, the United States government is no longer able to guarantee civilian water distribution. Mara closed her eyes. The voice continued. Citizens are advised to remain near population centers. Lena laughed bitterly. That's the last place I'd be. The broadcast continued. Unauthorized movement toward water infrastructure will be considered hostile activity. Then came the final sentence. Water is now classified as a strategic resource. The radio went silent. Nobody spoke. Finally, Ellis whispered, "They're going to kill people for drinking." Mara looked at the map. "No." She said it quietly. "They're going to kill people for controlling who gets to drink." 13. March. By March, Mara no longer recognized the calendar. January had been survival. February had been discovery. March became war. The first armored convoy arrived at the underground reservoir on March 4th. There were 30 vehicles. They had drones, helicopters, soldiers. Mara watched from a ridge. Calder stood beside her. "How many?" "Too many." "Can we fight them?" "No." He looked at her. "Then what?" Mara held up the map. "We don't fight them." She pointed toward the underground system. "We turn it back on." 14. The flood. At 2:17 in the morning, Mara entered the control room. Lena stood beside her. Ellis watched the door. Calder held a rifle. The machine hummed beneath them. Mara placed her hands on the controls. "Once I do this, we can't stop it." Lena nodded. "Then don't." Mara activated the system. Across the planet, ancient pumps awakened. Valves opened. Water began moving. Not toward governments. Not toward armies. Toward cities. Toward farms. Toward places where people were dying. Deep beneath the deserts, the reservoirs began draining. And for the first time in months, something happened that humanity had forgotten. Rain. It began in Arizona. One drop. Then another. Mara walked outside. She held out her hand. The rain struck her palm. She laughed. Then cried. People emerged from buildings. They stood beneath the storm. Some screamed. Some prayed. Some simply opened their mouths. The desert drank. 15. The price. The rain lasted 9 hours. Then the ground shook. The mountains cracked. Thousands of miles away, reservoirs ruptured. Cities flooded. Underground tunnels collapsed. Water that had been stored beneath the planet for generations surged toward the surface. The world had been pushed too far. And now it was snapping back. Mara watched a river form where there had never been one. Cars floated down the streets. Buildings disappeared. The desert became a sea. It wasn't salvation. It was another disaster. But this time people had water. Epilogue. 1 year later, Mara lived in a small settlement near what had once been Interstate 40. There were fewer people now. Much fewer. The old world was gone. There were no supermarkets. No constant internet. No endless highways. No 24-hour news. People grew food. Collected rain. Built solar stills. Guarded wells. Children learned to read maps before they learned to use computers. The world looked like something from a forgotten apocalypse movie. Except it was real. One evening Mara sat beside the fire with Lena. A child approached. "Is the war over?" Mara looked at her sister. Neither answered immediately. Finally Lena said, "No." The child frowned. "But we're not fighting." Mara looked toward the horizon. Smoke still rose from distant cities. Satellite weapons still crossed the night sky. Governments still existed. Armies still guarded reservoirs. But something had changed. People had learned how fragile everything was. Mara handed the child a metal cup. "Here." The child looked inside. Clear water. "What's this?" Mara smiled. "Something worth protecting." The child drank. Above them the stars appeared. For a moment the world was quiet. Then Mara noticed something moving across the sky. The thin white light. Descending. She stopped breathing. Lena saw it too. Neither woman spoke. The light disappeared behind the mountains. A few seconds later, the horizon flashed orange. Mara stood. The child looked up at her. Was that lightning? Mara stared into the darkness. No. She picked up her rifle. That was the next war. And somewhere beneath the ruined American Southwest, deep below the dried riverbeds and shattered highways, something enormous began pumping again. The Great Water War had never really been about water. It had been about who was allowed to survive.